We are live.
Good evening, and welcome to a virtual meeting of the City of Dublin's Architectural Review Board. The Ohio Legislature passed several emergency laws to address the pandemic, including the ability for public entities to have virtual meetings. We appreciate the ability to maintain our continuity of government. For the present time, we are holding our meetings online and live streaming those meetings on YouTube. You can access the live stream on the city's website. The meeting procedure for each case this evening will begin with a staff presentation, followed by an opportunity for the applicant to make a presentation. The board will then have the opportunity to ask clarifying questions prior to hearing public comments. Finally, the board will then deliberate on the case. In order to submit any questions or comments regarding an item listed on this evening's agenda, please use the form under the streaming video on the city's website. These questions and comments will be relayed to the board by the meeting moderator. We want to accommodate public participation to the greatest extent possible and welcome your comments on cases. Please use a valid name and address when submitting your comments and refrain from making any inappropriate comments. As is our habit, we'll begin our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. If the flag could be displayed, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, under God, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Judy, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Cotter?
Here.
Mr. Kanaki?
Here.
Ms. Cram?
Here.
Mr. Alexander?
Here. Our next item is the acceptance of the documents and approval of the meeting minutes. Now, the minutes were, we didn't get the minutes until Monday. There was an adjustment or two. Did everybody on the board have time to review them, or would you prefer we approve the minutes at the next meeting?
Did review them. I mean, did we
I scanned through. I thought they were okay.
Yeah, I just skipped it.
Yep.
So, okay. So everybody's okay if we then approve the minutes tonight?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So is there a motion to accept the documents into the record and approve the meeting minutes from our February 24th meeting?
I'll
So
move to
moved.
accept it. Yeah. And I'll second.
Ms. Cram?
Yes.
Mr. Kanaki?
Yes.
Mr. Cotter?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Our board, the Architectural Review Board, is responsible for review of construction and modification or alteration to any site in the review district or area subject to architectural review under the provision of the zoning code section 153.170. The board has the decision-making responsibility on these cases. A swearing in of anyone who intends to address the board on any of these cases is necessary. The agenda order is typically determined at the beginning of the meeting by the chair. There is one case eligible for the consent agenda this evening. And it's case 3, the co-hatched signs. Does any board members, do you wish to pull that off the consent agenda?
I don't know.
Okay, so we're all okay with that on the consent agenda. Is there anyone other than the applicant and the public who wants to speak on this case? Because if there is, we'll take it off the consent agenda.
We have no public comment on this application.
Okay, okay, good. Okay, prior to consideration of this item, we're going to swear everybody in. Okay, so if those of you who are going to speak tonight, both staff and applicants and other guests who might be speaking, please raise your right hand and repeat after me. Okay. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony to this board?
Yes.
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 Okay, thank you. Okay. All right, the consent agenda item, Cohatch Dublin signs. This application is a request for the installation of 2 signs for a tenant space on a 0.27 acre site, zoned historic district, historic core. The site is southeast of the intersection of North High Street with North Street. Chase Ridge will be our presenter. Chase, do you want to describe the case? Do we need, well, and I should say, does anybody on the board feel that we need Chase's presentation?
I didn't think we did at this point.
Okay, okay. So Amy, I see you shaking your head. And you okay, Sean?
I am.
Yeah, I don't
Okay.
need a presentation.
Yeah.
Okay. So is there a motion to approve? There were 2 conditions.
Yeah, exactly. Look at the conditions, yeah, real quick.
Yeah, I want to make sure the applicant is present, aware of the condition, and is okay with them.
I am present. I am not aware of the conditions. I did see that Chase had sent me an email about an hour ago saying he wasn't going to be here tonight, but it was on the consent part of the agenda. But I would need to know what the conditions are.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Nikki.
So I would be happy to speak to that. So I am standing in for Chase this evening, and the 2 conditions of approval that are recommended with this application are: 1, that the applicant obtain a sign permit prior to fabrication and installation of the sign, and 2, that the applicant provide us a detail of the light fixture subject to staff approval, which I believe has been provided to staff and is in the process of being reviewed.
Are you okay with those conditions?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Okay, okay. That being said, is there a motion to approve this?
I'll make the motion to approve the Cohatch sign.
Second?
Second.
Okay.
Mr. Alexander,
Yes?
Mr. Kanaki,
Yes.
Mr. Cotter,
Yes.
Ms. Cram.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Thank you.
All right, our next case is an informal review. It's for 110, 112 South Riverview Street. The application is a request for review and feedback to demolish a 2-family residence and construction of approximately 3,000 square foot single-family residence. The 0.589 acre site is proposed to be subdivided into 2 lots, zoned historic district, historic residential. The site is east of South Riverview Street, approximately 75 feet of the intersection with Penny Hill Lane. Mr. Hounshell will be our presenter. So Zach, the floor is yours, so to speak.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I just want to make sure that everyone is seeing the full screen correctly. Perfect. All right. Well, good evening, board members. Before you tonight is a request for non-binding feedback for an informal review of 110 and 112 South Riverview Street. The site is highlighted in yellow on your screen and is approximately 0.58 acres in size and is located southeast of the intersection of Penny Hill Lane and South Riverview Street. The site is currently zoned historic district, historic residential. The site does contain many natural features in its location approximately to the Scioto River. There is a significant grade change as the site moves from west to east towards the Scioto River. A large portion of the site is located within the floodplain. The eastern half of the site is located within floodplain, so the western half of the site is the only developable land on this site. Additionally, highlighted in yellow at the northern portion of this site is a 24-foot storm easement that does prohibit any development in the future. So shown on the screen is some additional context for the public and for our board members. Shown are two properties that are located on the eastern side of South Riverview Street, both adjacent to this site in consideration. 134 and 136 South Riverview Street are located just south of this property, and 84 South Riverview Street is located to the north of this property. Additionally, two properties are shown here that are adjacent to this property, but are located on the western side of South Riverview Street. 109 South Riverview Street and 129 South Riverview Street are directly adjacent to 110 and 112 South Riverview Street. Back in November 2018, this site was before the Architecture Review Board for review of an informal review. This request was for feedback on a potential demolition of the existing duplex structure and construction of a new 3,000 square foot single family home. This was a single-story ranch proposal that was mostly within the existing footprint of the duplex. At the time, the board was supportive of the proposed demolition and construction of the new home. However, the board did push back on the three-car attached garage that's located on the northern portion of this site, as they felt it was not suitable for the district. Following that meeting, there was no further application made for this specific application. On February 28th of 2021, City Council approved amendments to the Architecture Review Board section of the zoning code, which removes the historic district from the Bridge Street district and establishes updated zoning requirements. This is now effective as of March 23rd, 2021, so that would be yesterday. The new historic district code lays out more specific guidelines for development within the district, especially for residential properties. This approval also included a rezoning of the historic district, as it did pull it from the Bridge Street district zoning map and zoning requirements. This did exclude the historic transitional neighborhood that is located at the northern portion of the district. With the amendments, more specific regulations surrounding demolition were established. Demolition requirements within the historic district are now based around whether a structure is contributing or non-contributing, based on the historic and cultural assessment done by the city in 2017. So as part of the informal review, the applicant is seeking feedback for a potential demolition request to aid in the development of a single family home for this site. To issue some background surrounding the existing building, it was built in 1966 as a one-story ranch-style brick duplex. This site was included in the considerations of the historic and cultural assessment. And although this site is not found on the list within the Ohio Historical Inventory, the structure was considered as a contributing structure within the district. The applicant has provided additional images, which can be seen at the bottom of the slide, to show the existing condition of the home. The applicant will be required to prove the demolition of the contributing structure meets the criteria listed in the new historic district code, and will be required to pursue this demolition at a future ARB date. So shown on the screen is the proposed site plan for the entirety of this site. It should be noted that the applicant is intending to split this lot with the demolition of the the duplex structure located on the site. This would split this lot from east to west, creating two new developable lots. The lot split can be done administratively through planning and engineering staff, as long as it does meet the requirements for newly created lots that are listed in the historic district guidelines. Shown, the two lots that are created do currently meet those requirements. So with the splitting of the existing lot, the applicant would be developing the northern lot, which is the left lot that is shown on the screen. This lot is approximately 0.33 acres in size. It is sited just south of the 24-foot storm easement, which is shown at the edge of the home. The applicant is proposing a 1.5-story single-family cottage home and has provided setbacks. The applicant is proposing a 10-foot front yard setback, which does meet the requirements for homes sited on the east side of South Riverview Street. That requirement is 0 feet from the right-of-way or from the property line. And they are also providing a 4-foot side setback from the southern property line, where 3 feet is the minimum requirement. Shown on the screen are the west and north elevations of this proposed home. The west elevation is the front-facing elevation, which does front onto South Riverview Street. The form of the home is a multi-pitch side gable roofline interrupted by a front gable 2-car garage and a centered front gable for the main portion of the home, with the front door recessed into the front elevation of the building. The main materials utilized for the home consist of horizontal siding and vertical board and batten siding with a stone foundation surrounding the entire home. Window selections throughout the home include 2/2 windows, 2/3 windows, 1/3 windows, and single pane windows, which are all spread out throughout all elevations of the building. It should be noted that with the implementation of the Historic District Code, more specific requirements around garages, attached garages, are specified, and attached front-loaded garages are required to be set back approximately, they are required to be set back 20 feet from the front elevation of the home. Currently, this location is in line with the main structure of the home. Waivers have been, should the applicant pursue the desired garage location as shown, a waiver would be required to be approved by the ARB with the minor project application. And additionally shown on the screen are the east and south elevations of the home. The east elevation would face Scioto River. Here you will see the continuation of the differing gabled roof lines, as well as a stone chimney on the southeast corner of the building. The east elevation also captures a street level balcony and a lower level balcony, both within the same footprint. As seen on the south elevation, you will see a step down stone foundation from the front elevation, as well as you will see the main, the street level. So the street level and then the lower level, but the street level is cantilevered over the rear elevation of the home. It should also be noted that with the implementation of the Historic District Code, the maximum height for homes within this district have been lowered from 35 feet from grade to 24 feet in height from grade. The rear facade of the home would likely not meet this requirement. It would also require an additional waiver approval with the final minor project application. And for additional reference, the applicant has provided proposed characters of this home. You can see the front elevation of the building as well as the northeast portion of the building in reference to the significant grade change that you've seen throughout the site. Planning staff has provided the board 4 questions to consider for discussion later in this meeting. Those 4 discussion questions include, does the board support demolition of the existing home? Does the board support the proposed site layout? Does the board support the proposed mass and scale of the home? And does the board support the conceptual architectural character and details of the home? And if there are any other considerations by the board, they may be discussed at this meeting. If there are any questions for staff, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, Heather is the applicant, and she is present with us as well as her architecture team. Thank you.
Hey, Zach, I do have a couple of questions. They're mostly on this contributing, non-contributing. Because I went back to the history, and I think Gary, you were on the board before. So I went back in the history and looked at this, and there was a point in the last board meeting when they had it in 2018, and they talked about whether the structure was contributing, and it said it was not contributing structure, but it was eligible to be considered contributing. So what's changed between what we have on this board meeting in 2018, because the cultural assessment was done in 17. So I'm just trying to, because for me, a lot of it hinges on whether it's contributing or not. So I'm just trying to reconcile what happened over the last 2.5 years on the contributing side of the building.
Sean, can I make a suggestion here?
Sure.
This is going to be I think we should have the applicant make her presentation, because I think your question is a very complex one, and it's an important question. But I think let's let the applicant speak, make her presentation, and then we'll come back with these, because there are a lot of moving parts to that question. But I want to let the applicant present first.
Absolutely. Okay.
Well,
Heather, do you want to present?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for listening to our proposal and for taking the time out of your schedule today to consider our proposal. My apologies, my husband, Mark, can't be here. He is traveling right now, so I am talking on his behalf as well. Our intent is to build really in line with the historic district. And we were just really lucky to have been driving along. We've loved this neighborhood. We think it's really quaint. And we were just lucky to have come upon the house when we did. And we've always liked the neighborhood, and like I said, it's quaint, and we wanted to build one house on there, something that's going to be in line with the other houses in the neighborhood, size-wise, architectural appeal-wise. We wanted to be able to give somebody else the opportunity to also, have a house in that same neighborhood. And also for economic reasons, we wanted to split the lot to be able to have 2 houses on the lot. Again, smaller in size, something that will fit in line with the character of that neighborhood. We are Dublin residents. We've lived in Dublin for over 12 years, and our kids go to Dublin schools. Kaufman and just started Carr Middle School. So we love the neighborhood and just Dublin in general. And this is really going to be, we're hoping this to be our forever home. Really want to retire here and hopefully have, grandkids staying here at some point as well. So like I said, just wanted to thank you again and appreciate your support and consideration.
Thank you. All right, Sean. Now it's our turn to ask questions of both Zach and the applicant. So go ahead.
So Zach, it's just kind of back to that. So through my reading, it was hard to decipher a bit how we got to contributing or how we're contributing now, and from 2018, it appears from the notes it was non-contributing. So just if you can go back and maybe help understand a bit how we got from, I don't know if we got from A to B or if I'm just missing something through my reading. So just maybe if you can try to help unpack a little bit of what happened then and how we get to today that it is contributing. I don't know if that's clear or not, but
and I'm assuming you're directing that question to Zach, right?
Well, it could be Zach, could be Nikki too.
Nikki has her hand up.
Yeah, because it looks like maybe Nikki was there originally.
That does look to be the case, doesn't it?
Yeah, I see your name now. Miss Martin is there.
We're going to have to quote me from 2018 and do a side-by-side. So with that, Mr. Cotter is correct. I was just reviewing those minutes from 2018, and there was quite a bit of discussion regarding, the eligibility of this structure, which, eligibility is based on the age of a structure. So any structure that is 50 years old or greater is eligible to be considered historic, but is not obviously, by default meeting all of the kind of integrity markers that were assessed. And so when we look at this inventory sheet that was completed, nothing, in short, Sean, has changed between 2018 and 2021, other than potentially staff's experience reviewing and administering this document. And, I can tell you that when you look at this document and you see the contributing status, it is listed as recommended contributing. And I'm thinking at the time that when we look at the historic significance section of this document, it also says the building is recommended contributing. And the reason that that kind of language was used when the document was established was because there needed to be some latitude for the city to make decisions in administering the document, which ultimately City Council, right, did adopt this document. So basically City Council affirmed that we would follow these recommendations. I do think that, you know, particularly in regards to this property, there's quite a bit of discussion to be had on both sides. It looks like all of the integrity markers are met, which, you know, I would be interested to hear, you know, Ms. Cram's take on this based on, you know, her professional experience in the historic preservation field. But I think, quite frankly, our understanding of what we were administering in 2018, particularly my understanding, is different than it is this evening. And so we would take this document at its word that it is recommended contributing and therefore is contributing.
Okay.
If you don't mind, Nikki, do you mind if I add a couple things?
Please.
Okay. So when they did this document, well, first of all, to Nikki's point, that 2008 year, that was kind of the transition year where you guys received this document and council was deciding if they wanted the recommendations or not. So this report made a general recommendation to expand the years of significance for our district all the way up to the 50-year mark. Whereas when it was originally completed, the existing National Register district only takes it up, I think, to like 1940. So they expanded it to like 1967, which at the time was the 50-year cutoff. And when they did that, they were looking at the historic district as a whole because they wanted to include the mid-century modern in general. My interpretation of it is that the random mid-century modern ranch in the older sections is not contributing. The areas where you have an entire mid-century modern neighborhood, like on Monterey, there's that document covered those areas. And I think those, you know, my brain is frying, but the street next to the church, those are all mid-century modern, like as a group. So in my personal opinion, I wouldn't say that this particular ranch style duplex is contributing in the location that it is, in the context that it is. So that's just my 2 cents. I was under the impression they were recommending in general mid-century modern, and things of that era could be contributing. But that's just my thought.
Okay, thanks, Amy. Any other questions for Zach or for the applicant? I have a question for the applicant. In the staff report, you note that there are issues with asbestos, issues with lead paint, windows, foundation problems. Could you elaborate on, some of those are pretty common in any structure, so could you elaborate on the extent of those?
Sure. I can answer to some of those, and then I may also kind of pitch it over to Andy to see if he can help with some of the issues with the windows, for example. Based on the year that the house was built, it's our, I guess, our assessment or, you know, assumption that it was probably lead paint that was used back then, and we didn't hire anybody to come out and do a test. So it was, you know, based on really more the time at which the structure was built. We're presuming that there was lead paint and then also asbestos. And in regards to, you know, the windows, that's again just looking at the windows from a, you know, physical, you know, visual inspection. I don't know, Andy, if if you can kind of help clarify any of those details at all.
Sure. Again, I don't think a structural review has been done of the house, but just walking around the foundation, there's a corner of this house that is obviously settling, where the floor in the basement's cracked, the bricks cracked, all characteristic of the corner settling. The upper deck that was in some of the pictures isn't, obviously it's still standing, but it's probably not, if somebody were to occupy the house, long term, I would think that it would need to be repaired. But overall, in general, the house isn't in very good condition. So cost for the foundation alone, it would be costly to fix it. And then just to overhaul the whole entire house, new windows and so on and so forth, it'd be an undertaking. So.
Okay. We'll talk a little bit more about that, I think, later. Nikki, do we have any, or Zach, excuse me. I do want to, we did receive, I'm going to move on to public comment, and then we'll get back to those questions and more discussion. I want to let everyone know we did receive 3 letters from people in the immediate vicinity, and all those letters were in support of the demolition. One of them did raise a question about how this would fit in the new guidelines, which we'll discuss, I'm sure, shortly. But they were all in support of what you're proposing. I don't think there's any need to read these letters. Any board members feel the compelling need that we should read these?
No.
Okay. Nikki, do we have any additional public comment since the letters?
We do not.
Zach, sorry. Okay. All right. Okay. So we don't. All right. So I think at this time we can kind of expand our conversation then and begin looking at those 5 questions. Zach, do you want to put those up?
Yes, I can do that. Give me one moment.
Okay. Well, I know the first one was the big one is the demolition. So, and I think one of the things we need to be really clear is in the new code, and Zach, here, you need to correct me if I'm wrong, but in the new code, for this demolition to occur, because this is listed as a contributing structure, and it is documented that way, there are 2 routes the applicants can go. And one is the credible evidence of economic hardship if demolition is not approved. So what's the hardship? And so I think that's going to involve a lot more due diligence, cost estimates, and a really studied report on the conditions. And the other is evidence, and this would be evidence by probably an architectural historian, an independent consultant, that this is a non-contributing structure. And so that's my understanding of the 2 routes they have to go. Is that correct?
That is correct. So as you stated, the first would be reviewed as a contributing structure within the district based on the what the historic and cultural assessment is listed as, and those requirements are listed in the historic code. The other route, as you stated, is making a case for the structure not being a contributing structure and instead being a non-contributing structure. So that would be through a waiver request that would be heard separately from the board.
Okay. All right. So with that, just kind of laying the groundwork, I'd like to hear from other board members your general feelings about the demolition here.
Well,
I don't mind starting. In my opinion, as an architectural historian, my opinion is it's not a contributing structure. But unfortunately, the applicant can't hire me to do that. That'd be a conflict of interest. But I would say it's not contributing. Even if you go with it is contributing, I really do think you'll be able to meet the criteria for demolition on this property. I think you can show the economic value and the value to the neighborhood of demolishing this. So I would be in support of demolition. I think you could prove that. the criteria that we're asking.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I guess for me, I'm a bit. I spent some time reading that document about what makes it contributing. I'm not an architect, but and I had a hard time finding something that points to this building being inside of that. But certainly, I think as we go down the path, I tend to agree with Amy. I think you'll find some ways, but I think that as you go through it, finding what the property's current level of economic return, it's being rented now. So I mean, I think there is a hurdle there that somehow you have to work through to say what it's going to take to bring it back up to a better code or what it would be. So I think just looking at what I saw in the register and I'm going by the property and kind of the conflict of whether it was contributing or not contributing to begin with, I think there's a way to find that. But for the applicant, I think there are some spots in here now that the code is, trying to find a way, finding a way that it's non-contributing, I think is certainly the best way to go forward, because I think trying to find a waiver if it is contributing, I think it's a bit of a higher hurdle. So, I mean, I think as Amy said, I didn't find anything that said it was contributing, but I think going through the rubric that's in the code and coming back with those details is the way to go forward. But I think you probably can find a way, but I think clearly you have to be able to demonstrate where the hardships are.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, that's me. Basically what Amy was saying earlier about if this was, what's that, Franklin Street, I think it's the one she was trying to think of, or Monterey over there where the mid-century moderns are, this would be different. But also this house is really an outstanding example of mid-century modern at that. So, looking at it from an architectural point of view, there's not much character to this actual structure that even makes me look at it and go, oh, that's mid-century modern. That's a classic of it. So in my opinion, I would be for moving forward as a waiver. I'm not alone. That's it.
Okay. Well, I think if they can meet one of the two conditions, then the option exists for demolition. Those issues, the reason I asked for more clarification on those potential structural and other shortcomings is those are things that are commonly addressed in any remodeling or renovation project. So unless I were to see dollar values of those compared to rental returns, compared to other costs and benefits on the property, I don't yet see critical evidence of economic hardship, just because we deal with those issues every day in renovation projects, and so, but if it meets the standards, then maybe meeting the standards as non-contributing is a route they could go. I still think it's a usable building, and so just demolishing something is a waste of materials and filling landfill with more building product, where this building could have another life. It's actually better sited on the property and utilizes topography in many ways better than the proposed building, and has more in common with the houses that are built along that ridge if you look at the way it's sited. And so I think there are positive aspects of the structure that I think if it's demolished. Now, like I said, I'm willing to look at numbers and see the costs, but I think it's a waste of a building if it's demolished. And right now it is considered contributing in the document we use in our guiding documents. So that's my feeling about that. Okay.
And maybe just because depending on the applicant, if they decide to find the hardship, the waiver would come to where? Maybe I'm not sure. How does that? I guess maybe I'm asking Nikki or Zach.
Are you asking for process?
Yeah. So it would be granted by the ARB. So I mean, somebody would do another. So the applicant would hire someone to determine that it was not contributing. Is that how that would work? If I'm reading L correctly?
Correct. So they would be they would be tasked with identifying what makes this a non-contributing structure, different from how the historic and cultural assessment had identified it. So that would be what the applicant would be required to do, and that would be for the waiver. They would still be required to get demolition approval following the waiver, though.
Well, the question for me is who, so they're going to have someone come back, who will make that determination? That from, if they bring evidence that they believe it's non-contributing, they'll bring that to this board, and then we'll go through that that process to determine that it should be changed.
Yes, that is correct. Everything would be at the ARB.
Okay.
Okay, are we ready for the next question? I think so. Okay, do we support the proposed site layout? Who would like to start?
Could I ask one more as we got to this part of a clarifying question just for Zach? I mean, so if I read the the building correctly, the site that is left is 70 feet wide. So a structure the same as this. Wow, I'm having some struggles here tonight. If you built a similar building on the second site, it would fit and it would be within code, correct? If I just read the numbers correctly.
So the lot split is made to meet the minimum requirements listed in the historic district. So yeah, I can't speak directly to whether this exact footprint would fit on that southern lot, but that would be up to the discretion of whoever were to develop that in the future. But it does meet the minimum requirements.
Okay.
Hey, Zach, on a similar note, then, you did have a diagram where you showed where the lot split was. The southern lot did look, is it slightly smaller?
It
looked
is
slightly narrower than the lot they're building on. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Part of that, though, is you can see here on the screen, the northern lot does take on the entirety of the 24-foot easement. So if you remove the 24-foot easement from an 89-foot wide lot, you're left with about 60, is it 65? So it is technically, the developable area is smaller than that southern lot.
Okay, and then what is the side yard setback that would be on the new, you said in your presentation that it's a 3-foot minimum. Would that apply then to this new lot too? They could build within 3 feet of either of those lines, side lines?
Correct. So the side setback is 3 feet minimum, and there has to be a combined minimum of 12 feet. So if the minimum would be 3 and 9. Yep.
Okay, combined of 12. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
That's a good question. And any other comments about the general site layout?
I had a question about the waiver we'd require for the garage, because the garage is at the front. It's in line with the rest of the house, I guess you could call it. And I'm trying to think, Gary, you're probably even a better answer for this. If it would even be possible to set a garage back because of the topography is so severe. So I'm guessing probably not, and that's why we're drawing this straight in a line.
Well, since you've directed the question at me, in my experience in something similar along the river, the grade was even greater, and we used a precast concrete plank on the garage floor. So it's atypical residential construction, but it's maybe a smaller scale version of what is done in a parking garage. So there's some cost. In this case, it did provide the opportunity to have usable accessible space at that level. So you didn't have to just dump a bunch of gravel in there. So that's one option. The other option is you build essentially a retaining wall, the back wall of the garage, and fill it all with gravel, fill up the difference with gravel or some kind of compacted fill, and build your slab on it. So there are certainly, you're right, Frank, to point out it's a challenge on the topography, there are ways to handle it. To bring that up, if this were all on one lot, you could separate the garage visually to a much greater extent. So the spirit of the code could be met by not necessarily pushing back, but creating greater separation. And it could be a connector, it could be a detached garage. So there are ways that part of the code could be met without pushing it too far back.
Gary, do you remember, or maybe Nikki, how far it was supposed to be set back normally from the house? The line.
The setback for the garage, you're asking?
Right, usually. I know that this doesn't, as it stands, meet the requirement.
Right. Front-loaded garages are required to be, it's 20 feet from the front elevation of the building.
Gotcha, thanks.
But I think generally the first question from the massing, I think we talked about massing and scale, and certainly I think from the front, looking at the front and just how it sits on the site, I actually think it looks reasonable there. I think Gary, you're right. I mean, if you spread it out a little bit, you'd give you some other options with the garage and how it might fit on there. But if you just look at the site layout that's existing, for me, I thought it fit pretty well. I'm not sure what the height was. Does it fit in the 24 feet? I wasn't sure. But certainly in the back, it's going to need some variance, or need some waiver about that, because certainly I don't know how we're going to count grade, but it's going to be much higher than 24 feet from wherever we count, depending on how we count grade in the back. But certainly from the massing, I didn't see an issue other than where the garage is going to sit. I think is certainly is going to be a challenge.
Amy, do you have anything to add regarding the site layout?
So the site layout, I'm fine with the existing layout on the lot that it's on. My concern lies in splitting the lot, and I want to understand how usable the southern lot will be. I think it's going to be pretty hard to find someone who's going to want to build on that lot, the size of house that they're going to want. If we're talking, it was what you said, approximately 72 feet on the frontage of the southern lot, and if they have to have 12-yard setback or 12-foot combined side yard setbacks, that leaves you about 60 feet width of a house. You can't go too deep because of the slope, and you're also going to be extremely close to the house to the north. And I just wonder if you're going to find someone who's going to want to spend the money to build on that lot. I'm just concerned it might be a little small. So I think when the applicant comes back, I think there should be some type of feasibility analysis on what could be built and the expectation of the size, the square footage that they could get on that lot. My preference would be that they keep this as one lot and just build one house and have a little bit more space. But, I think I can support a lot split with some additional information.
I'm going to jump in real quick with Amy on that. One thing I did actually like about the lot split is it does reduce the size of a house that could be put there. I know we've seen a lot of pretty larger size houses proposed in the historic district. And by shortening this lot, you've automatically made yourself have to create a smaller house. So, while I agree with Amy and Vanessa, I also like the idea that splitting this does force someone, if they want to build there, and that's their choice, not ours. If they ever wanted to build on that site, they would have to make a smaller fitting house, which I think would actually fit better in that strip of the street.
Which I agree. I love the small house. I absolutely like the small house. So
I don't know. I don't know if we would, as the architecture review board, want to give notice in the fact of what their financial feasibility would be on the southern lot. I mean, I don't know if that actually falls under our purview. either way, if it's good or bad. It's just interesting that the idea to me was it would keep smaller structures. But yeah, they would be probably costly, mainly a lot of it because of that topography you'd be dealing with.
I don't know if it's happening to the rest of you, but it seems like the tail end of some of our comments are being cut off, or maybe it's just a lag I'm witnessing. So hopefully we're able to get everyone's comments. The only thing I would add about the size and placement on the lot is just the garage, and the point is to emphasize the front of the house, de-emphasize the garage, and if there's a way to take square footage out of the porch or just push the whole thing back, reduce the depth of the garage, do something to make, I think the 20 feet here is just totally unrealistic and doesn't make sense with the site. But I do think some way of de-emphasizing the garage will actually help the house. I think the house will benefit from that. So that's the only additional comment I had to add. Zach, can you prep us with our next question? Okay, do we support the mass and scale of the home? We've addressed mass a little bit in building footprint, but not so much in terms of height and volume. So who would like to start?
I can start. So I think I think I might have said it a bit on the lot, on the layout also, but I think from the front, I think the mass looks quite, for me, it looks, as I think you say, we're trying to make them slightly smaller. And I think the mass from the front looks good. Okay, garage, I think is a separate question. And I think it looks to me like the height's going to be under 24 feet. I guess we'd have to verify that, but I think it looks like it's a story and a half should be underneath that. The mass from the back, okay, it's topographical a bit to how it's going to look, but for me, I didn't find anything unappealing from the back either. I have to say, from I don't know if it's in massing or how the thing looks, but certainly how the short or the pylons or the pillars that sit there somehow look. Okay, for me, look a bit. They look not massive enough, maybe, for how the thing might look. But we'll have to just look at how we sort through the height in the back, because it certainly is going to be more than 24 feet, depending on how we pick the grade. But if I just look at mass and height and scaling, for me, it's I'm okay. I think we'll come to form and features in the next part. For me, that's okay.
Okay, thanks, Frank or Amy?
I support the mass and scale. I love that it's a small house. We haven't seen too many small houses, and I like it. And I could support a waiver for the height in the back due to the slope. So I'm okay there.
Okay, thanks, Frank.
Yep. Actually, one thing I really like about the house is it hides its size from the front. It's still, I think, almost 3,000, just under 3,000 square feet, as I recall. And you would not think that just looking at the front of the house. I do like that. I guess kind of jumping into a little bit of the next question as well. I can't remember the setback as it stands in this drawing from the street, but I wonder if you could bump the front of the house forward and maybe bump the garage back just a few feet, and that would actually give more perception. I mean, obviously you're not going to get 20 feet. It's just too far out there, I'd say, without going back and actually looking myself. But I don't know if that's possible, though, to move the living part of the structure forward. That's it.
Okay, thanks. And I would support the waiver for the 24 feet in the back. I don't think it's fair to apply that criteria on steeply sloping sites. If it meets it at the street and at the grade at the front, I think it's fine. So, and I'm generally fine with the mass and scale. What we might do in the next section, because I think we're probably going to go through more of the consultant's report and talk about the elevations and the details. And what we might do is talk about, because it may be easier for a compilation of the minutes. It may be easier for the design professional and the applicants to get all the concerns about each elevation from all of us at one time, as opposed to jumping back and forth. So maybe as we go through this next question, if we could start with the, if you put, Zach, one of the elevations on the yeah, do we support the conceptual architectural character and details of the home? And so maybe we'll start with the west, and since they're both up here, the west and north elevations, and we should each go through our concerns and issues, and then we'll shift to the next set of elevations.
Sounds good.
All right, who wants to start?
Go ahead, Gary. You haven't had a chance. I know you're chomping at the bit there.
Well, I'm supposed to be facilitating. I would prefer. All right. Well, as a design professional, I think a lot of the comments in our consultant's report about the elevations, I would agree with. Starting with the front. What's a little, one of the nice things I think is the attempt to break the house into at least two pieces. You have the big piece with the primary living spaces, and then the garage and this little connector with a window in it. But what's a little awkward, I think, is the way the materials don't differentiate that. Board and batten siding kind of blurs that distinction between what's inside the porch and then this space beyond the porch. So I think the design, I don't agree with the consultant completely necessarily getting rid of the board and batten there, but I do think perhaps it would be more complementary to the design if the board and batten was just within the porch itself. On the north elevation, a lot of concern about the change in the fenestration. The openings are very different when we go from window to porch. You could make openings in porches that are primarily vertical or have more of a relationship to the windows. I think the north elevation, I think I would recommend a structural engineer be involved in this design process before the final drawings are brought to us. Because Sean's absolutely right. I have a feeling that column in the corner is going to be very, very different. Those other columns won't be necessary. And if you did want to put those other columns in, they should have a relationship to the division up above. These pieces don't seem to work as well together as they really could. And I think that would help unify the elevations. So those are my comments on those two elevations.
I have similar to Gary. I think I actually like the front board. I like the two materials in the front. I mean, I think there's a separation there, and I like that. Okay, maybe as you say, Gary, maybe I see now architecturally, maybe it could be in a slightly different way, but generically, I like that. I like the two different materials. Board and batten for me is okay. I mean, I know that the consultant wasn't too crazy about that, but certainly for me on the north elevation, I tend to agree. For me, having the stone, okay, even though on the other side too, it's recessed underneath there. It feels strange that it's stepped down like that. It just looks somehow a bit out of place. And I agree with Gary. The way the pillars are sited there is also, for me, it's not quite. It doesn't look quite right. And you have this house with these wooden pillars that, for me, you have this. And as Gary says, as you move up, then the windows just don't line up. So for me, I think, could they be casement? Could they be something else that kind of looks more synergistic with the rest of the building? I think that for me, it would be more interesting. And I think having that, if the stone went all the way across instead of step stone, and then you have the siding, I also think that somehow would flow better and make it look like that there was a, something historic. It was set on top of something that was sturdy. So that for me is what I see there.
Okay, thanks. Frank or Amy?
I could just jump in, I guess. I'm not too worried about besides structural issues, that's not my forte. So somebody who has that education would have to speak to the structural matters. But the north elevation and south elevation, I think a lot of that kind of depends on the angle of the street driving in. You probably won't see much of it. It'd be nice if they lined up like you were saying, but it doesn't bother me as much. I think a lot of it probably disappear. I know that's a porch on the back. Other than that, the board and batten, that didn't bother me either. It's a personal choice, I guess, for that material in there. But otherwise, I like the size and look of the house.
Okay, thanks. Amy?
Yeah, the front of the house in general, I like. It would be nice to offset the garage slightly if possible. Definitely not 20 feet. That's not happening, but a foot or two, something to give it a little dimension. I didn't quite get the window thing. I can't tell from this drawing how these windows are different. I don't know. I was okay with it. On the north or on the west side. On the north elevation, my biggest thought was, yeah, I don't know that the posts that you've originally drawn in are going to be sufficient. I think you're going to need something much more substantial at the corner to hold that weight. And I'm thinking one way to continue the stone, it might be a big stone pillar or something at the corner. I don't know, but I think the pillar thing's going to work itself out, because I think once you start designing it, you're going to need something more substantial to hold that up. So that was about it. As far as the window type on the porch, you don't need to, in my opinion, and it will come with more detailed stuff later, it doesn't have to be the same configuration of window on the porch as the house. As long as it clearly looks like a porch and we know it's a porch, I'm okay with a different window, a complementary window type. So that covers the west and north elevation.
Okay, all right. All right, Amy, since you went last, you want to lead off on these?
Okay, sure. Yeah, for me, the rear, again, it's hard to tell from the existing, simple drawings how wide these this porches and stuff are going to be. So I think that will work itself out. And yeah, in general, I like it. I like the general look. As preference, I don't prefer the stepped foundation. To me, I think it would look better with a solid line all the way across. It's at a particular height. I didn't have an issue with the cantilever that the consultant mentioned. That wasn't a major problem as far as I was concerned. The window in that little section seemed awfully large compared to the other windows on that elevation. That was the only thing that I thought seemed a little off. But again, all things I think can be worked out at the next step. I think they're definitely on track and I like it.
Okay, thanks.
I guess if you want to go backwards in order, I really don't mind the step down of the foundation. I don't know where you would draw the line and go straight across is the other issue. I mean, otherwise, if you went from the top, you just have a big stone wall back, basically all the way going across it. So otherwise, looking at the back of the house too, I like how the board and batten kind of continues from the front. It's in the back. It's a nice feel, but really, I don't have anything else to add about the views, the elevation, sorry.
Okay.
Same for me. The back for me, I like it. I think pillars will work itself out. Windows, I think, are fine. As you say, from personally more preferential to a straight line on the stone, but that's more personal preference probably than anything else. But overall, I think it's okay.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I agree with the consultant. I think the house is improved if the stone continues straight across. It's pretty artificial looking, and it would help break the mass of that corner up in the side elevation. And her other comment about bringing the stone of the chimney down, since the chimney, at least as it's drawn, is in the same plane as that other surface below it. You could just bring the chimney down, marry it into your stone, and then it breaks up that really solid corner, and I think might help that elevation. A big question when I turn around, The back is, where are the grids? If you're going to put, if you're going to put grids in the windows in the front and side, and think about if you're in rooms that have two exposures and some of your windows have grids and some don't, I think you need to have either grids on the whole house or no grids. The porch is the exception, but I just think, you know, if you're going to do this, the design needs to be cohesive. And I mean, we have these comments in the code about false historicism, and just applying the grids in one area, alluding to something old, that smacks of what our code says we should avoid, this false historicism, not being consistent in your windows all the way around. So that's my feelings about that. I think, Zach, correct me if I'm wrong. I think the last comment or the last item you had was any other considerations by the board. Looks like that's correct.
Yes, that would be correct.
Do any of our board members have any other thoughts that you feel should be expressed?
No, I think well, at least I got mine out already with the garage stuff.
Okay, and I see Amy shaking her head, and looks like Sean's shaking his head as well. Does the applicant have any questions for us?
Hi, if I could address the board. Again, thank you guys all very much for your input. It's all great input, and you know, just going through the report and hearing some of the comments. Yes, I can address some of these things now. As far as the board and batten on the front of the home, Mr. Alexander, I know you talked about maybe getting rid of it on the hyphen and keeping it under the porch. But my thought was, maybe can we use it on the hyphen and then just do the horizontal siding underneath the porch? Just to make it, you know, make the hyphen separate from the rest of the house. Is there any objection to that?
Oh, no. Well, first of all, these are suggestions.
Right.
We would continue to discuss these when you come back to us. But you're addressing my concern, is differentiating the hyphen from the porch itself. Okay. So, and we're not, even though we tend to make suggestions, we're not telling you the way it has to be done. But yeah, that would be fine. That addresses what the issue I had with that. You're no longer blurring the distinction between porch and hyphen.
Okay. And then to address the columns, those are, again, conceptual place markers. I do consult a structural engineer and will focus more on detailing those columns, and also, you know, looking at the size and the shape of the columns. So that will be addressed. As far as the garage setback goes, since we are 10 feet back from the setback, from the right of way, and due to the slope and you know, the foundation, the cantilevers, the garage depth is all, you know, driven by trying to keep the foundation as reasonable as possible, because the farther back you go, the lot does start sloping, you know, and it gets more and more steep. So the thought is to keep the foundation as close as possible, you know, the back wall as close as possible to the street and to reasonable grade. So since we are 10 feet back from the right of way, I guess my initial thought would be to pull the front wall of the house forward a bit and kind of keep the garage where it's at. Is that what I'd like to know, what thoughts were on that before we go any further with that?
I would be supportive of that. I mean, I really just think you need a foot or two. I mean, I think you just need a little bit of differentiation, you know, whether you move the house part forward or the garage back. I think you just need to separate it just slightly.
Okay.
And also, I mean, kind of Gary also said this, we're not gonna, like, we're not here to tell you how to design your building. This is definitely your baby. And I haven't been to the back of this building either. I've never seen how steep it is, so I can only imagine, knowing the rest of Dublin, that's pretty steep. So this is just a suggestion, if that's even possible. Is that something they'd want to do? Maybe just moving the house might add to that depth, give it more illusion of separating them out. That's what we're trying to say.
Okay.
So yeah, we're obviously, at least me, I'm not going to vote you down because you're not 20 feet back out and hanging 100 feet off the ravine.
Okay.
Yeah, and to be clear, I would support the waiver, because it sounded like you, either way, whether you move it 1 foot off or not, you need a waiver because the garage is not 20 feet off. So I'm in support of a waiver for that.
Right. Yeah, you need a waiver no matter what.
Okay. And it's, yeah, the porch windows, that has since I've talked with the homeowners. The porch windows, originally the idea was, currently in their sunroom, they have a window type that it's almost like a triple hung or a double hung or a quadruple hung that slides up to get maximized opening, but still keep it winterized somewhat. We've since decided that we can take those out and just make it a screen porch. And obviously the column spacing and will be appropriate to what the foundation is below. So that's a comment on that. As far as the windows go, I know that the report talked of, sash windows or double hung windows as opposed to casements. The casements, for the main reason, the back of the house, obviously we're trying to maximize view. And so eliminating the grids back there was just to keep an unobstructed view. And since the back of the house is only visible really from the ravine, hopefully we can, work with that. And as far as the chimney and the cantilevers, I guess the cantilever again is another topic I wanted to touch on and just get everybody else's feeling on, what your thoughts are on whether or not you felt that was appropriate. And again, just putting weight to your comments and getting an idea of how the rest of you felt on that. Because that is obviously an issue or a bigger issue with the foundation. Obviously, like I said, the smaller I can keep the foundation, the better. And that the cantilevers facilitate that. So
I know Amy responded to your question about the cantilever. I would have no problem with that. And I don't I still feel strongly about the grids. However, I do not share the consultant's feeling about not using casement windows. I think there are plenty of examples in historic homes where casement windows have been used. So I think the casement is actually a good choice for smaller windows too. So that's my feeling on those. Frank or Sean, you want to comment on those 2 points?
The cantilever doesn't bother me either. And I'm the same with the casement windows as Gary. So no issue with me.
Yeah, I concur. Do we actually, the other thing is, I'm not sure what's driving the grid in the front of the house. I take it that's just a personal desire, correct?
yeah, just to keep it looking a little more homey and not as sterile without, I like grids, especially, in that type of a window. I feel like it's the little little details that that make a house more interesting. So
I personally have no problem with casement windows. You could put casement windows throughout the whole place. I like casement windows.
Okay. But yeah, I think that's again, I really appreciate everybody's comments and input. It's very helpful. So that's I don't have anything more.
All right. Well, thank you for your interest in the community and your presentation. So we'll look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you very much.
All right. Our next case This is okay. This is a new case. It's 53 North High Street. The application is a request for replacement windows for a building on a 0.22 acre site zoned historic district, historic core. The site is southwest of the intersection of North High Street with North Street. Ms. Martin will be our presenter. So Nicole, whenever you're ready.
Great. Good evening. Okay, as mentioned, this is a request for review and approval of a proposal for new windows for 53 North High Street. The site is located at the intersection of North High Street and North Street, immediately south of the Dublin branch of the Columbus Metropolitan Library. The site is 0.22 acres in size and contains a historic structure with a building addition to the rear. So a bit of background, the historic portion of the structure, which is sited along North High Street, was originally built in 1845 and functioned as the Dublin Christian Church until the late 1800s. According to the city's historic and cultural assessment, this property is recommended contributing to the historic district, and this property is also identified on the National Register of Historic Places as part of the larger Washington Township Multiple Resource Area listing. So these are the existing conditions of the structure today. You can see on the left-hand side of your screen the building from North High Street. You'll note here that there has been a front porch addition to the historic structure, although you can see the original front gable form as well as the stone cladding exists today. To the rear, from Darby Street, you can see the significant building addition that has taken place. This building addition is integrated with the character of the historic structure, although is separated by a connector and has a cross gable with a T floor plan. So some additional existing conditions looking at the areas of the site that are under consideration today. So this application specifically calls for the replacement of 8 windows, all on the historic portion of this structure. 3 windows are located along the south elevation of the historic structure, as shown on the left-hand side of your screen. 3 windows are along the north elevation of the structure, with 2 windows being on the east elevation visible from the front porch. And then the final portion of this application is a replacement door for an existing door located on the building addition portion of the building. Additionally, the trim is proposed to be repainted on the building to coordinate with the replacement windows that are proposed. So as we look at the existing windows on the structure, staff has provided some photos for the board's consideration this evening. The majority of the windows are of a consistent size and scale and are 2/2 wood windows. The windows located on the porch are seen on the left-hand side of your screen. A window on the north elevation of the building is the center image. You'll notice the north elevation has storm windows that have been placed on the exterior of that wood window, somewhat concealing the character. And then there is one of the 8 windows that is proposed to be replaced along the south property line that is significantly smaller in size and vastly different in character from the rest of the windows that are proposed to be replaced, and is shown on the right-hand side of your screen. So with this application, the applicant is proposing a renewal by Andersen window to replace these historic wood windows. The Historic Dublin Design Guidelines always recommend preservation of existing wood windows unless it can be demonstrated that they are deteriorated beyond repair. In such cases, replacement windows may be acceptable, provided that they are able to simulate the character of the original wood windows. So the renewal by Anderson Series 1, from staff's understanding, is a wood composite window, which is fabricated of wood fiber, which is then bound with a resin and then clad in extruded acrylic. So today, the newly adopted Historic District Code permits full wood windows, wood clad windows, either clad in vinyl or metal. So the proposal before the board this evening would require review and approval of a waiver to permit the wood composite window clad in acrylic. So the applicant is proposing a 2/2 window. However, the grills are proposed between the glass. Staff is conditioning that a full simulated divided light window be used should this renewal by Anderson Series 1 be the selection. And so that would have not only the spacer bar between the glass, but also interior and exterior muntins to divide the panes. The window is proposed to be pre-finished from the factory in a terratone color. This color is a gray brown. The trim on the building, which is the lower image on the screen today, is a gray green and is proposed to be repainted terratone in that kind of gray brown to match the windows. And the replacement door will effectively be like for like. It will be a smooth steel door that accesses the building addition portion of the structure. So with that, staff has reviewed the waiver analysis and found that given the visual deterioration of the windows, it seems that replacement windows may be warranted, and that a wood composite window is highly similar to a wood window based on staff's basic understanding of that window. So in review of the waiver, we are recommending approval as well as in review of the minor project review. So the minor project review is recommended with the one condition. With that, I would be happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, the applicant, who is the property owner as well as a tenant in the building, and then also a product representative from Renewal by Anderson are here to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Board members, any questions for Nikki?
Maybe just one or two. So the windows that are there now, are they, I mean, how old are these windows? These windows are, maybe the tenant would know. I don't know if are they older or are they somehow more in the last 20, 30 years?
Yeah, so from a staff perspective, I have no knowledge to the age of these windows. They do appear to be quite old, and they are single pane wood windows.
Okay.
I don't know if the tenant would have anything else to add.
Nothing specific as far as the amount of years. It is fairly old windows based on the previous owner of the building. Rich Taylor said it could be. They're obviously not original, but been around for a very long while.
Sean, I would estimate that they probably are from about the turn of the century, around 1900-ish.
Okay, so I mean
that's what I was told.
Okay,
they're probably the second set of windows that have been in that building.
Okay, And maybe just from the tenant, also Nikki or the tenant, was there anything investigated to try to rehab them, or is it just not? Is there a reason it's not possible? I have to admit, I didn't walk up and tap on them, so I don't know how bad they are. But was there any thought about trying to rehab them in a certain sense?
Can I answer that? This is Mel.
Sure.
When I first met Tim, he broached that subject with me because naturally a rehab would be way less expensive than replacing the windows. However, the difficulties with rehab, you can't really go from single pane to double pane. In addition, you have the windows there now are not double hung, they're single hung, meaning only the bottom sash goes up, the top sash is fixed, which is why in one of the photographs you looked at, there's only a half screen going on there. Our windows are double hung, so the bottom goes up, the top comes down, and that's good for the comfort of the tenants because you can get kind of a cross ventilation going top and bottom. They also come with a full screen, so you don't have that metallic edge going across the center post of the window. In addition, our screens, the exterior of our screens are color matched to the exterior of the window. So unlike the photographs before you where you have these historic windows with an aluminum screen around it that you can see, not very visually appealing. Our screens blend in. Now that I have the mic, can I go on with something, or do you just want to stick with one issue at a time?
Well, I think it's fine if you want to go ahead as part of. I have questions for Mr. Sistone too. So if you want to go ahead as part of the applicant's presentation, that's fine.
All right. With respect to the full divided light buttons, I've already reworked the proposal and sent the numbers to Mr. Sistone, and he's aware that this is a requirement. So he told me he has no problem doing that. The good news is that just like the composite that makes up our window frames, that same composite is used in the exterior portion of the mullion. So it's not going to be just wood out there subject to the elements. There is a spacer bar in the middle, and there also is an interior button. So it sounds like that would comply with the thing the committee is asking for. I'll let it go for a while, and you have questions for Mr. Sistone, and I have a few other comments, but they make questions directed to me first, so I'll step back momentarily.
Board members, do you have? I have a few comments, but I want to hear from you. So let's start with questions for the applicant, or more questions for Nikki before we get into a discussion of how we feel about this. Do you have any clarifying information that you need?
Well, I guess I'll just ask, has the applicant looked into how to rehab these? Have you looked into fixing them, or of all you've looked at is replacing them?
I have. As a matter of fact, I was probably about 2 years ago, I was in the process with Kyle Kreidler to replace the windows at that time. But even during that time, I did meet with a few contractors, and it just didn't seem like it was. Again, I don't know anything about replacing windows, but I was just told it wasn't something that would be, I guess, feasible. And replacing them just seemed like something that would be, I don't know, a much less tedious project. And I did think it was going to be less expensive to just go another route rather than replacing them. But it just seemed like, as I investigated more, it really wasn't the case. And yeah, this is something that probably it's more so from the efficiency side of things. Like Nikki mentioned, we have to put storm windows on the outside. The building The windows literally there's zero energy efficiency. We do have tenants in there, and it's just not bearable in there without the storm windows right now at the way it is. So this is just something that needs to be replaced, more so from an energy efficiency standpoint and for the comfort of my tenants.
Okay. I'll just say up front that, I mean, our code asks for us to restore windows before replacing them. So in order to approve replacement, I would want to see additional information that you have researched the cost and got some quotes on what it would take to restore these windows. You can make older windows more efficient. There are ways to do it. And some of those ways are cheaper than putting in new windows. And I think you need to at least present an argument or present evidence that you've at least considered that, and you're not just taking, I guess, the path of least resistance of just replacing them. So.
May I answer, please? Is that okay?
Please go ahead, Mr. Richards. Yeah.
Okay. The major problem with rehabbing the window is you're going to take a wood window and you're going to replace it or add to it, and it's still going to be a wood window. So this brings me back to your revised code, which said a wood window, a metal-clad wood window, or a vinyl-clad wood window is what's required. The problem with the revised code is that doesn't matter how you clad a window, wood can, and in many cases will, eventually rot. Now, here's a quick background. Anderson Company began over 100 years ago, 1903. They had the luxury of cutting down 100-year-old trees that had 100 growth rings in it, and they made the windows from that. And that old growth lumber was impermeable to the weather. You just slap a coat of paint on there, and it's good to go. Once a month, I'll have an appointment in Bexley with a 100-year-old house with original wood windows. And even though it's only single pane glass and there's no energy efficiency going on, there's not a trace of rot on any of the wood. In the 1950s, sort of the beginning of the environmental movement, there was an incident with the Rocky Mountain spotted owl. Suddenly, the government told the companies they couldn't cut down ponderosa pine trees and certain fir trees anymore. So companies responded by beginning to grow their own lumber on their own forest lands. And they discovered that if they tinkered with the seeds, I call it steroids for trees, they could get the trees growing faster and faster and faster. So these days, when you buy a wood window or rehab a wood window, even if you're cladding it, it's not the old growth lumber. It's new growth lumber, which may only have 15 growth rings in it and is highly susceptible to rotting. And that was the genesis of companies saying, hey, if we have to expose the wood windows to the weather, we're sunk. So we better figure out a way to keep the weather off the wood, and hence the beginning of the cladding era. It started sometime around 1980. Okay. The difficulty with cladding is as follows. Number one, there's still wood underneath. Number two, there are a myriad of circumstances where moisture, condensation, and when the sun hits an aluminum clad window, that heat goes into the aluminum and it goes right into the wood, and the wood swells, almost making the problem worse than it was originally. So whether it's any kind of clad window, it's subject to rotting from the inside out. I could supply the board dozens of pictures of wood windows, whether they be clad with vinyl, aluminum, or nothing. Examples of them rotting, many cases from the inside out. when they're covered with the cladding.
Mr. Richard,
I just want to clarify. I don't have an issue with clad windows. What I was asking was, are the existing windows hardwood windows? Is the existing hardwood rotting? What would it take to reglaze or seal those windows to make them more efficient? I just need some more information about the existing windows. I'm not questioning your new product. I'm asking, what's the condition of the existing windows to justify having to take them out?
Okay.
and additionally, I want Mr. Richards, I want to stop you here because I want to make clear to you that when historic districts specify the kind of windows we do in our guidelines, there are a lot of issues involved. And it's not just you're presenting this from one point of view. And in a few moments, we're going to get into some other questions about the windows that are being proposed. So you're presenting this from one point of view, but that's not the only point of view that we have in historic districts. And what's in our code, and I'm going to read that in a moment, is not unique to Dublin, but it is common language in most historic districts for replacement windows. So I want to ask the applicant, Mr. Sistone, did you explore, and I know the staff has made it clear to you, these do not meet our guidelines. Did you explore replacement windows that do meet our guidelines?
That meet your guidelines?
Yes.
I would say I explored the windows to an extent of the knowledge that I have of windows, and I let experienced people like Mel and the gentleman who I met with 2 years ago take it to the next level.
So
again, go ahead.
So I was just asking, so you didn't talk to another representative that might provide, or even another Anderson product line that would meet the standards of our code?
I have not at this time. I have met with someone a couple of years ago, but at this round, back in December, I believe, when I first was realizing that we needed new windows, the Anderson was the one that I stuck with. Now, they weren't the first one that I called, but they're the ones that I stuck with because Mel convinced me they had a better product. They had a great warranty. And then from there, I figured we would make sure that it would follow the standards of what a window needs to be in the historic Dublin. But from there, again, my knowledge of windows doesn't go anywhere beyond, for example, the windows that are facing High Street. We cannot take the storm windows off that. Literally, there's cracks in them at the top. There's no energy efficiency in there at all. Yeah, to answer your question, Ms. Cram, there is some rotting around some of the wood around my windows. I don't know what I don't know, but if it's going to take some initial investigating in order to see if we can repair versus replace, I would just hope the process of replacing is not lengthy. I consider my tenants. I understand there's a code that has to be done in historic Dublin, but I kind of would like, something done. Again, I don't know what I don't know. What is that process for the replacement? Who do I find? Things like that. I'm willing to take suggestions. I'm willing to do whatever is necessary. But at the end of the day, I want a quality window. I want to be able to not have storm windows outside my window, and something that makes the building match, or a window that's going to make the building keep its historic look. That's kind of where I'm at.
Before I could, now I stood in the rain this morning and looked at these windows and walked around, and to me, I agree with Amy's request, because to me, it did look, they were potentially repairable. But if you made the case to replace them, there's additional things our code states, that the dimensions of the sash members and the profile of sash members and the muttons must meet the current profiles. So we would need to see, as a part of your application, I spent time on Anderson's website. I spent time on the renewal website trying to find what we call in the industry cuts through the sash. So I could see all the widths and dimensions of those different components. So for me to consider a window that doesn't conform to our guidelines, it still needs to meet the guidelines. And we haven't even talked about the composition of the difference between wood in these windows and what the code intends. So I would need to see a cut that shows us the profile, because those windows with cladding, when I look at some of the other replacement window products, they do not offer the same kind of profiles that you see with the clad windows. You'll see curved elements, you'll see smaller elements, and there's an ability to customize with, I know working with some of the other window lines in this kind of work, there's the ability to customize all of those components to match your existing. So I think for me, I agree with Amy's request, but I think for us to consider a window that doesn't meet these standards, we need to have a lot more information than we've been given so far. So, and I know that's not on you. This is probably the first time you're hearing this.
No, understood. As far as a sample, I know Mel can provide anything you need to see regarding the composite of the window. Okay. I'm speaking for Mel on that one.
Well, and he needs to be able to show that all those dimensions match the existing dimensions, because that's word for word what comes out of the code.
Right. I'll be able to get diagrams of the cuts to Tim in the next 24 hours.
Sean and Frank, Amy and I have been doing most of the talking on this. What are your feelings?
Well, I mean, for me, I'm a bit with Amy, and just replacing 100-year-old or ripping out 100-year-old windows for me in a historic building. For me, I agree. There has to be some more than you see in what we see here. That there's a reason that somehow they can't be made better. And Mr. Stone, it could be 100% true that you just can't fix them. I agree, but here, when you say in a historic area where we have probably some of the last windows that are from, as Amy said, potentially from the turn of the century, to take them out doesn't feel quite right. Maybe you can't fix them, but it's hard for me to just say take them out without having a little more detail. And then to Gary's point, I mean, they have to, well, we have to find a way that they meet the dimensionally of let's say, if we have to replace them in the spirit of the code, we have to make sure that the new windows somehow fit inside of that. But mine is more just making sure that it's clear that you can't fix them.
Thanks, Sean. Frank?
No, nothing else to really add. I mean, I pretty much covered everything that I can think of.
I want to give the applicant just a couple tips too. You can always contact the Ohio State Historic Preservation Office. They have lots of information, particularly about windows. It's a very common item. You can go to their website. They have guidance on contractors that handle historic windows that might be able to give you quotes or give you an assessment of your existing conditions and if they are rehabable. Also, because your building is listed on the National Register and you are an income producing building, there are historic tax credits, both at the state level and the federal level, that can help you supplement the cost if you actually restore these windows versus just swapping them out. And there are also state grants that are, I've sat on the state grant committee, and many years we've given money to people to replace their windows or to restore their windows rather than replace. So there are options out available to you, and restoration isn't necessarily more expensive than replacement. It just depends on the condition of your windows, which at this point, we don't have that information, but.
Mr.
Thank you for your
Sisdall,
suggestion.
do you have any additional questions for us or comments? Or
I have none. Mel?
Yes, I do. With respect to rehabbing those windows, oh, sorry. With respect to rehabbing the windows, the key element of any window in controlling the transfer of heat from outside in and from inside out in the wintertime is the argon gas that fills up the space in between the two panes of glass. Most window companies, when they manufacture, they get the two panes, they have the whole assembly, then they drill a hole in and they suck out as much air as they can and they shoot in the argon and seal it up. They get anywhere from an 80 to a 90% fill of the argon. We, as we're about to put the second pane of glass into the structure, we pass the whole structure through a vacuum chamber. So there's zero air present. And we're able to affect better than a 99% fill of the argon. As a result of that and the materials we use, the fail rate on our seals after 20 years is less than 0.5%. So the concern I'm submitting to you folks there is, if you go for a rehab, this is my 10th year with renewal. Rehabs are usually Band-Aids. I'm not talking about the beauty and you can make it look exactly like the other window and have the muttons the same diameter. But in terms of the energy efficiency, rehabbing a window is always a Band-Aid. So there's every chance that in 10, 15, 20 years, that building is going to be applying to do the same thing that they're applying to do tonight, because the energy efficiency cannot be the same with a rehab window, because you're starting off in a whole different place. There's no way a rehab gets 100% fill of argon. It doesn't work that way. So the last thing I would like to say is that in your description of us, our product, you called it a Fibrex clad window with extruded acrylic. That's almost a bit of an oxymoron, because clad windows generally are for wood windows that are wrapped with something to protect it. So there is a space in between the cladding and the wood of the window, and that's where the devil lies with moisture and condensation. Our windows are not clad. We earned 30 patents over 2 decades developing this material. One of the patents was for a process called co-extrusion. So as the Fibrex composite is being extruded through dies, the acrylic is extruded at the same time. And when the acrylic lands on the composite, it's not the same thing as just applying paint to a surface. The color actually bonds and fuses and becomes one piece. So part of the warranty is that the cladding, the finish, the acrylic, won't chip, crack, peel, blister, flake. And that's for 20 years. Initially, it was 10 years, and they ran a durability test. And after 20 years, the windows were operating like brand new and looking like brand new. So they doubled up the warranty from 10 years to 20. So again, my biggest concern is that if you're going to rehab it, the energy efficiency will not have the same life as it will by replacing those windows with a custom sized, almost completely filled with argon unit. Thank you.
Mr. Richards, thank you. We realize, we know your company has an outstanding reputation and very good products. We just have to have a number of steps we have to take here based on our role on the board and the code that we're working with. And the steps haven't been taken yet. So we still have a few more steps to see and find out what the right approach is here and if these windows will work. But I appreciate your time and your presentation this evening. Mr. Sistone, I don't think you have the support for us to vote. I don't think if you were to we were to put forward a motion and you want us to act on this, I do not think your request would pass this evening. Do you want to simply table this?
Mr. Alexander, could you, when you say table, is this something that can be revisited in a short period of time?
Well, if you can provide the requested information, Nikki, can they be on next month's agenda, or do they have to submit? Is the filing deadline too late for that?
Yeah, so typically we would ask that you have materials into our office 4 weeks before a meeting. The meeting in April is the very last Wednesday. So I do think that you would probably have a week and a half to work with us to get some of these answers. It sounds like, Ms. Cram has pointed you in the direction of some resources and, potentially those cut sheets are available. And, I think you do have a course forward. It would just need to put some effort to it to get that on next month's agenda.
Yeah, as far as anything that's needed from Mr. Richards, I can gather that quickly. As far as gathering information on renovating windows, I guess it's up to the timing of whoever, whatever expert's going to come out and maybe give me that quote. So I'll work as fast as I can. Hopefully we can get this thing turned around as soon as possible.
I just want to say that you had 2 components to your application, and one was the door. And I just want to say that I have absolutely no problem with your door. You're replacing kind for kind. So just so you weren't surprised later or whatever, I have no problem with the door.
Forgot there was a door.
Well, that's on the newer part. That's not as important.
Are you interested? You weren't going forward with the door before the windows, are you? You're going to do that all at once?
Well, I haven't thought about it. I'd have no reason not to stop process on moving forward with the door. As a matter of fact, the door, we just recently had some damage to the door, so it's probably a good timing that the door would need to be replaced sooner than later.
Well, because go ahead, Frank.
No, say, yeah, can we just vote on the door aspect right now so he can at least progress in that part?
Yeah, I think if someone makes a motion to table the discussion about the windows and approve the requested door, then we can go ahead and vote.
Nikki has a process comment.
Yeah.
I would just say, to be quite frank, as Ms. Cram noted, the door is highly similar to what's existing. Staff really brought this forward as a package of improvements, right? The door and the windows and the trim. But if we were looking at this door kind of as an insular issue, I would really consider that maintenance. So it could just be removed from this application. And when it returns to the commission or the board, it would just come without the door. So Tim could go ahead and replace that at his leisure as a maintenance item.
A replacing kind, yeah. So
Yeah, I think that's good, because also you don't want to make him do a new application for just the windows. So if he can move forward with the door, that would be good.
Yeah, so you, I guess in terms of process, could just request Tim to table this application this evening. They could table it. You and I can work together for you to move forward on that door and then talk about next steps.
Do we have to table it to that specific meeting? Because I have a feeling getting subcontractors out, and if you want multiple subcontractors in a week's time, could be challenging. Can we just table it and leave it at that, or do we have to table it to that specific meeting?
No, you can just table it, and whenever the applicant's ready to bring it off the table, we will schedule it.
Okay, good, good. That gives it more flexibility. All right, would somebody like to make a motion?
Sure, I can make the motion to table.
Before we vote, are you okay with that, Mr. Sistone?
Yeah, so just to be clear, so the door's green light, right? I can move forward with that without any
Yes.
further okay, approval. And then the windows, this could be a month, maybe 2 months tops. Obviously, depending on my turnaround time, we can
More
get back to this.
research, yeah, on your
Got
end.
it. Okay.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. Could we,
I'll second the motion. I forget who
Okay.
made it, but I'll second the motion.
all right,
Mr. Kanaki,
Yes.
Mr. Cotter,
Yes.
Ms. Cram,
Yes.
Mr. Alexander.
yes,
I have one other suggestion for the applicant. I just wanted to, if you're still there, there's an organization called Heritage Ohio,
Mhm.
and they also do lots of window. They have a list of window restoration. They probably have 24 companies listed on their website. If you just type in heritageohio.org resources windows, it pops up. So that gives you 24 people that you could call to get some quotes and assessments of your windows.
And Amy, I think Columbus Landmarks is now doing some kind of
They do,
shops or something like that too.
yeah. Columbus Landmark, theirs are more of educational classes and seminars to teach people how to do it or to give them information. But yeah, they're a good resource. But the Heritage Ohio actually lists actual people that you would call for quotes.
I'll check their website
Right.
tomorrow. Thanks for the suggestion. Thank you.
And they're right here in town too. They're on the east side of town. So you should be able to reach them pretty easily.
Great. Yep. Reach out to me tomorrow. Thank you.
thank you. All right, next on the agenda, goal setting. Nikki, I'm assuming you're sitting in for Jenny in this.
That is so true, so true. Well, really appreciate everyone's additional time this evening. We will try to make this quick but meaningful. Obviously, 2020 was a strange year for us all, and we didn't really have an opportunity to do continuing education or to meet any needs or requests. I feel like learning how to do a virtual meeting was our continuing education for 2020. So with that being said, there is an opportunity in 2021 to take a renewed look at the board's interests in terms of training and educational opportunities, as well as just to have an open line of communication regarding how staff is providing materials to the board, whether that is helpful for you, whether you'd like to see changes. We want to make sure that the resources we are connecting you to are informative and you feel as though you are able to make professional decisions within your capacity as appointed board members, realizing that, right, you all come from various backgrounds, some related to architecture and historic preservation, but some not. And that is, representative of the city of Dublin and the community. So, and that's why you've all been, right, appointed. So with that, questions were provided in your packet. I am going to maybe just go through that one by one, and I'll read it so that we can just have a dialogue with each other. But the first question is, what training and educational topics would the board like to participate in or learn more about in 2021?
I have one that I brought up, and one of them is more for me. It's more process. I mean, as you say, we come from all different places in our career and our backgrounds, but I think Gary reviews cases in a certain way, and I'm sure Amy does, and I do, and trying to understand, maybe not doing it the same, but if we approach the problem in a similar way, I think there's some value in, I don't know if it's us with someone, but it could help me to facilitate how we look at a case. So you can see it from, if there's multiple angles, I look at it, I like to look at the code and look at other things. I mean, Gary's looking at it from another way. And for me, it could be interesting to have a facilitate just to say, okay, when you get a case, how does staff look at it? And just try to build some continuity around that, because certainly having the different view I think is super important, but coming to a common end is what we're trying to do, right? So I don't know what that looks like exactly, but I know as we talk, every time somebody says something, I'm like, oh, I should have looked at it from that angle. So trying to see it from, if there's ways that you as staff or people outside look at these problems to distill it down to something, for me would be helpful.
Yeah, that's a great comment, and I can wholeheartely say that we feel the same way about you. There are definitely times when it's like, wow, I would have liked to have one of you at my desk with me when I wrote that report. So, but yeah, I think that's definitely something we can easily address, and I do like the idea of having some facilitator to help us do that. So that's great. Thank you, Sean.
I have a question for Sean on that. Were you talking about like where we all sit down and staff talks about how they look at these, and then we each talk about the approaches we take?
I'm not sure it's quite like that, but I mean, maybe a more of an open form, just say, because as you read a case, like you probably look at it from a certain lens, but certainly inside the code, there's certain rubrics that we look at. And if we look at one like, economic hardship, okay, what does that mean to you or me? Because if I look at economic hardship, I would say it's going to cost money, but the thing brings in money. So just trying to look at a few of the more common things and say, okay, if I look at it that way, and then we just, not that they have to be the same, because I think having the disagreement that comes to a commonality is good, but just trying to have more of a common thing. I don't want to get everybody to say I look at it this way, but more holistically, how do you approach the problem to get to commonality, right? I'm not sure what that looks like exactly. So
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Any other, educational topics that you may want to explore?
One of the things I think is helpful is to know when other studies are being done that impact the district, because sometimes things will be done either by a committee or a consultant or negotiations to buy some property within the district that it might impact the way we make decisions and do things. So I think having a broader picture of what other groups are doing, like the subgroup that was created to look at different kinds of opportunities in the district, just knowing that there's an initiative and there was something that sparked that initiative, it would be worthwhile to know, because I think maybe some of the decisions and discussion we had in changing the zoning might have been impacted if we were aware of what was going to occur with 6 homes in that particular part of the district. So I think having a bigger picture of what's going on might impact how we view things.
Yeah, I think actually to add on to Gary, because I was thinking about this earlier and I kind of forgot about it. It is one of those things that we aren't aware of the agenda or the goals and the reasons, the logic behind purchasing those homes, even though they, squarely sit in the heart of the district, basically. So there was a little bit of, I guess, surprise a bit that this happened. Like, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. What's the plan? So maybe I wouldn't say there's lack of communication at all from Dublin. I think it's, you're always open, but maybe just, where did that come from? Where did that idea sprout?
I'll chime in on that same topic. I think it's more of a maybe we need to start having a line item at our meetings or something where you give us an update on what like council's initiatives are. Because, you know, I knew about council stuff with the houses because I sit on the historical society board, and there's been many times where city staff has asked the historical society questions or involved us early in the process of planning type things, which I don't think ever gets to ARB, which would be helpful. Stuff like council's initiative to do the Historic Dublin Task Force and all of those meetings and everything. It would have been helpful. I got the updates again because I was on the Historical Society and knew about the task force, but the rest of the board didn't benefit from that. And it would have been helpful to have, you know, they met sometimes twice a month, and it would have been nice to have progress updates or this is what's going on, or, you know, the fact that they were considering working with the Main Street program. Well, that's a huge thing that ARB didn't get to participate in or know about, and it would impact, you know, if the city were to participate in the Main Street program, that it significantly impacts things in kind of the direction of ARB. So I think, I don't know that that's a training per se. I think that's just
Communication.
maybe a communications at our regular meeting. Maybe at the end of our meetings, you give us an update on
Or
these council
it could be
initiatives.
even a document, a email, a Word document, however you wanted to send it. And that gives us the leisure to like, oh, this just came in, and I could go and sit on my own time and read what's going on. If I have questions, and I can address them. Because that doesn't really need to be in a meeting forum. That could be, Nikki, what is this talking about? What do you mean you're doing this? Or where is this coming from? Oh, I think this is great. Whatever it may be.
Or heads up that those meetings occur. Like I said, council had an entire work session a couple weeks ago about this task force they're going to develop for those 6 houses and what they're going to do, how they're considering preservation easements and all that. And again, I knew about it because of other groups that I'm in, but it didn't even actually occur to me that, oh wait, we should let everyone on ARB know too, because maybe you guys want to sit in on those meetings or know about them too.
Right. I think it made it into Dublin this week, because I remember reading about the meetings or whatever they're creating.
Yeah.
That was
sometimes you read about it later in the paper, like, oh, they did that. It would be nice to have
exactly
heads up.
Definitely. And I think those are fantastic points, and we can definitely figure out a way to make sure that communication is getting to you. We've had various different strategies in the past. You know, we have done kind of a one-pager memo in a packet, or just to provide a regular update. And I think that is maybe more attainable than just kind of randomly at the end of a meeting that ends at 9:30, sitting down to discuss all of the visioning that's happening behind the scenes, right? Because we only have so much capacity that late at night, but we can definitely make sure you're
do not want to be here to midnight. No, I think what you just said, even if it's just practically a one-page memo, you know, if any one of us would want more information on that, we know where to go from there. You know, I don't need your entire thesis statement coming out with all this information, because that's going to be overwhelming as well. But like, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening. For more info, go here.
Jennifer Delgado sent something today, right? The council action points.
First time I've ever seen that.
Exactly. And we're talking about, I just was looking through this to see how much, I didn't read it yet, but to see how much detail in it. But I think that could be an interesting thing, huh? Because there's not much. So
yeah, you want to do it on your own time too, because, you know, we're all working, most of us, you know, during the day. So it's pretty much, oh, an email came in, it sits there, it's still in my email box, because after that I went basically to this work.
Right. And yeah, I think there are lots of great opportunities here. Jenny Delgado is the new clerk She replaced Ann Clark, who had been with the city for many, many years. So, you know, I didn't know that she was including you, but I mean, I think that's great. And, you know, maybe just another opportunity to make sure all lines of communication are open. Okay. Well, I'm gonna move on if that's okay. If we were to do training, right, we all just discussed we're busy, independent of you know, work and ARB meetings and right, just having a personal life. Would you prefer to have, you know, dedicated presentations as you've saved ARB evenings on your calendar, or would you prefer to be able to do it self-paced, you know, something that's more on demand? If we found articles, would you read them if we sent them to you? I guess, you know, we're definitely not going to implement all of these because that would be overwhelming for both you and us. But
Sure.
if we wanted to try one or two, do you
Yeah,
have
I mean, I'll jump in with you. I think self-paced is the best. I mean, right now, my own personal life has gone crazy in the last month and a half, 2 months. So it'd be like, well, I'm not going to make that meeting. But if you gave me something, oh, okay, now I have 20, 30 minutes to sit down and read or view, whichever it would be, your item, whenever it would be at my own schedule, which would be a lot easier to obtain.
Yeah, I would agree with the self-pace or also self-interest maybe is the other key because like there's a lot of free online seminars about historic preservation and planning and stuff like that. And I think if you maybe again send out a memo of, hey, here's some stuff coming up this quarter that you might be interested in, you know, we could check it out and see if we want to register for some of it or
I tend to agree with Amy on that one. You know, if there's multiple things where you could look at places, you know, because certainly things that Amy knows I don't, so she would look at that and say, okay, I know that, but it would be more important for me, let's say. So I think that could be interesting. And at some point, having some meetings together face to face, to be quite honest. There's people. I mean, like I don't know if I've ever met Gary face to face.
No, and one of the things I talked about with the previous chair when the three of you joined is let's go out for a drink after one of these meetings, so we could get to know each other.
Who says I'm not now?
Pardon me?
Who says I'm not now?
Oh wait, we were supposed to get that. Wait, we're still streaming the feed, Frank.
Oh, never mind.
I agree with you, Sean. And if some of this could be done in an informal setting, for me, it's easier if I have a time blocked off where I have to do something, because my life is so scheduled that even my hobbies are scheduled. So if I have something that's blocked off that I have to do, I probably do a little bit better. So if it was at the end of one of these meetings, if we have short meetings, or if we could do it socially for me. And I like doing it collectively because you can see how other people feel about the information. And you can discuss the value of the information to what we do collectively.
Well, and I also think, well, fingers crossed, I think we probably, most of us have had at least one of the vaccines yet, right? So we're going to be able to meet in person soon.
Tomorrow.
And I think, oh, yay. I think that it would be really helpful just to have at least one social meeting where we get to know each other. Because I know when I was on P&Z, we really were really good friends and we knew what each person's strengths and weaknesses were. And that goes to the very first point that Sean made, that it helped us read the applications. We knew what some people were looking at while other people were looking at other things, and we knew where our strengths and the comments were. You know, we had a landscape architect. We're like, oh, well, I don't have to worry about tree species. You know, she's going to know that. And we had someone like we had traffic, and I think that would be helpful to know more about each other and how we're looking at the applications and how we can depend on each other to fill voids that some of us don't have.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a great point, Amy. And right, you don't want to have to duplicate each other's work, right? You all need to have your own perspective, but could potentially work smarter, not harder. So that's something good to keep in mind. And we have conferred with the law director's office, and you are able to get together in a social capacity, provided that you are not discussing any public business. And I do think, to Amy's point, at some point this year, hopefully we will be back together. And potentially we could schedule a meeting outside of a formal ARB meeting to do some training. We will have to wait until we get some official direction from the city. I can tell you that we are headed back to work full-time April 1st. And there's no anticipation that there would be any hybrid subsequent to that. So I think we are moving on that trajectory from a local government standpoint. So with that, let's keep moving tonight in the interest of time. In terms of the packet materials that are provided to you, is there anything that you find particularly helpful that you think, oh my God, absolutely, you must keep doing that, or things in your packet that you find completely mystifying, like why do they waste their time providing this to me? Those are the types of things I guess we're looking to kind of tease out with this question.
I don't know where to start.
I'm happy with the
Yeah,
content
yeah.
of the packets, and since we stopped using that one particular consultant, I am much happier. So
Good.
Yeah, I think if there's some of those, when you go through those questions in the packet, part of me thinks, well, you could just eliminate the ones that aren't pertinent. And I'm talking here where you say criteria, not the questions at the end where you say criteria, not applicable, not applicable. But then I also understand that you're probably working from a template. So it's probably simpler to just leave those in and say not applicable than to just X them out and renumber things. So I mean, to me, that's the only kind of redundant or unnecessary information in the packets.
I'd have to say, from like a legal standpoint, I like that you list all of the criteria just to show that you considered it and whether it is or isn't applicable or whatever. And there'll be times where we disagree. If you say that it's met, we might disagree and say it's not met or whatever. So I like that it's all listed out.
Yeah, and to Amy's point, that's exactly why we list it, right? All of our decisions have to be based in the codified ordinance, like what the rules actually are. So we have to tie our analysis to each of those. And that's why we list them, even if they're not applicable. And it also is hopefully a guide to you all. And that's just a little bit of background about that. But yeah, it can definitely seem a little onerous at times. And with the amendments to the Architecture Review Board Code, all of those duplicative board order standards of review, those go away. So we no longer have those. We literally just have the application review criteria for each type. So if you recall, we used to have like 4 sections. It was like 3 different board order standards of review and then the application. So it is going to be more streamlined moving forward. So hopefully that's good for us and good for you. Okay. So I guess with that, maybe we can just close out. Is there anything else on your mind for 2021? Something that's on my radar that actually Gary reminded me of is that we have previously done tours of historic Dublin, walking tours. Usually, we would take a walk of projects from many years prior that have since been constructed. and talk about those projects. Obviously, we can't talk about active applications, but there is still a lot of opportunity to even see some of the more historic buildings we have and how that compares to some of the infill development.
You know, Nikki, actually, that came up. I remember, gosh, it had to be over a year ago now. We talked about doing that. And it was also, we talked about maybe if something could be drawn up of not every case, that's insane, but, you know, hard cases, why they went one way versus another, or things to look at. Like go to house 1, 2, 3, and you'll see that somebody asked to do this, and this is why we said yes or why we said no. So like very particular learning points, I guess you could say, instead of just like, here's a bureaucracy, you know, and giving you a pile of red tape.
Yeah.
Working in government, I can't have enough of that. So gimme. So yeah, I mean, that actually would probably be a very good tool to have of, you know, learning points for ARB. What is the, you know, what trips people up or the faults or things of that nature.
Nick, go ahead, Gary. Okay, Jake, just one point, and I don't know how we do it because when you have active cases going on, and maybe I'll go back to last month's case, and as there's discussion, let's even with today with windows and all these, there's discussions that you have with applicants as they're trying to formulate or move their project down the path, and certainly when we get the packet, sometimes it's alluded to that there are discussions, and I know they're active cases, but things go on in the background that somehow I find that it's hard to decipher that, okay, there's this discussion going on. We get the packet and then we're seeing it. We're seeing it after there's been discussion in the background that somehow doesn't make it to the case file. So then we're churning back through things that either were discussed and decided is the wrong word, but the conversation's going down one path, and then we do, okay, in our meeting, either we're retreading the same path, or somehow we're missing something that was discussed earlier. So I know that's sitting outside of the meeting, but are there ways to try to understand, and if I pick from last month, I mean, certainly you felt like the applicant felt something in the way the thing was progressing, and it didn't move the right way. And today, like windows,
Yeah.
there's things going on, and I'm
So-
not sure how you do that inside the legal framework of how we're trying to decide things. Yep.
Right. And so I guess that's a great point. And I think it actually relates to the first point you brought up in this whole goal setting about, you know, what is the process? Like, how are cases coming to you, and how do those get reviewed, and what types of conversations do we have internally, right? Because, for example, when I review an application, it's not me sitting at my desk doing it by myself, right? I consult the entire planning staff, because similar to you all having different perspectives, they have different perspectives as well. And so it's not just meeting internally, we do meet externally with applicants as well. So I agree. I think there could be potentially a better understanding of how that works globally. And I think that would be a good training item. But
There's
yeah,
gonna be a process in the background that just helps us understand how you got to a certain point. You're leaving an open question on purpose, and sometimes we're like, or for me, I'm like, okay, that I know that question somehow has been churned somewhere, and we're getting it in a different way. So that could be a good training. That maybe as from the first part. Yeah.
you're muted, Amy.
It's getting late, so I'll try to be quick on this. To Sean's point, I just want to give us an example. So I serve on a group called the East Dublin Civic Association. We're kind of a planning group for East Dublin. And planning staff over the years has gotten to the point where if a developer is coming into East Dublin, they call me and they say, hey, can we present this idea to you? We want to see what the neighbors think. Is this going to be a problem? And so they come to us before they even go to Planning and Zoning Commission to just kind of like say, hey, are you gonna we would need a waiver for a drive-through, or would you be willing to do X, Y, and Z? Are the neighbors going to be upset? What's their issues? Are they mad about traffic or whatever? And sometimes those conversations are one meeting, sometimes they're multi-meetings, sometimes they come to our organization and present plans and everything, and it's never gone to the city yet. But they want to get our feedback, because if they find out that we're going to be all against them, they're like, oh, well, maybe we'll reconsider. So I'm sure stuff like that happens in the historic district too. You know, I'm sure it does. And we never hear about it, but then they're like, well, we talked to all the neighbors and everyone's okay with it. So I think that's just, you know, that's them trying to see if the neighbors are going to have an uproar. But again, it's a separate process from, I mean, they find out from us, well, the East Dublin Civic Association, we're not going to have a huge uproar when you go to planning and zoning. We're not going to come out in masses and, you know, protest this. And they're like, okay, good. So I think that some of that stuff we just might not hear about or know until they come before us and like tell us they talk to all the people. So
Yeah.
Okay.
I have one other thought that's kind of related, and it's somewhat related to the last case. And I haven't been to this site for a couple of years, but the city of Columbus and their preservation office, I think, put this together, where they have one site where they have, like Amy's point about rebuilding windows, and it's one place where you can go and you can find information about windows, slate, tuck pointing brick, and all kinds of preservation issues. And they're short articles. Usually there's some that are about specific windows to use and not to use. And you know, the applicant might have really benefited, and we can learn from those too. I mean, we can all learn from those. But I think that would, and you hate to keep sending people, well, why don't you go look at this website that the City of Columbus Preservation Office has? Because there may be ways to tune it specifically to issues that we deal with in the district and these buildings deal with. But that seems to me like, because yeah, you can Google something and you can find a bunch of articles, but it's hard to sort through and decide which ones from a valuable source, which ones just from, you know, some guy who's fixed his house once and thinks he's an expert. So having a place where we have reputable information about these issues would both be, I think, good for us, and I think good for applicants.
A resource, basically.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it sounds great, but that also sounds like a heavy lift. That would be a
Well,
big
you just
great. I like the idea too. I'm not poo-pooing it at all.
You just add things to this as you find them. So you don't start with saying we're going to post 15 curated articles about different aspects of restoration.
Yeah, and I think there's definitely an opportunity to potentially connect people with resources that already exist. And then obviously try to find some things that are maybe more tailored to Dublin and do a kind of a combination approach. You know, so I think there is potentially some opportunity for some synergy with our community relations group. You know, there is probably going to be some, you know, additional planning that's happening down in historic Dublin. We are undertaking a community plan update, and it's called 2035. So as part of that, looking at some of these special planning areas, realizing that you can't do a detailed plan for every area of the city, and particularly areas in the city that are already developed, maybe don't need the same level of detail, that areas that need to be preserved may. So yeah, lots of opportunities there. Okay, well, I want to thank everyone for your discussion, particularly at the end of an agenda. So we will kind of take this back, synthesize it. We've been doing this with all our boards and commissions, and we will kind of report back to you in April with a memo and a proposed kind of quarterly strategy. So you'll see something from us.
Hey, Nikki, just a heads up. I can send you the link. Do you go to the National Park Service's technical preservation briefs? Like there's a link and they have like 50 preservation briefs that
Okay.
are all online
Is
about.
that different from a bulletin?
Yeah, the bulletins are higher. The bulletins are higher percent. The preservation briefs, I mean, their titles are really specific, like repair and replacement of historic windows, like tuck pointing, heating and ventilation, historic signs. So something,
Okay.
I can send you that link. It's actually pretty helpful.
Yes, please. Please. That's good to know. Thank you.
Mhm.
Is there anything else we need to discuss?
I think we're good.
I don't
All
think
right.
so.
All right. I think this meeting should be adjourned. Okay.
Nikki, do you want